So we're going to talk about kind of an edgy topic, I think, today. That's probably the opposite of what you hear, sort of mainstream, but that's why I exist. So that's why I tend to do stuff that's a little bit on edge. So, and just so you know, when I come to present or when I write blogs or whatever, everything is done over a 5-year literature review. So all research based, I don't usually cite like the million references at the end because nobody wants to read that. But just so you know, that's where the information's coming from. It's just not something I thought up in my head. I also will talk through kind of experience with clients of mine and what I've seen over the years, over hundreds of people too. And so then, kind of trends over the last few years too. Here is a really good book. You can get on Amazon or wherever, but that kind of details a lot of what we're talking about today. So you can come look at it after too. It's called The Great Cholesterol Myth. I did a full literature review on this one and some others right here. But that's good. Like if you like to read and like suck in some of the material, and I like highlight the books and do cliff notes on everything, then you'll love that. There's a ton out there, like lots of other books, but this one I feel like is like decent for the layperson to read. So not super like nerdy, sciencey, or clinical heavy. So I think that's good. We'll talk about supplements at the end too. My name is Sarah Hotchkiss with Catalyst Wellness Coaching. I'm here every other month talking about something. And I can't remember what I talked about last time I was here, but so I recognize some of you not. And
weight loss barriers.
Huh?
Weight loss barriers.
Weight loss barriers, that's what it was. So that would have been in January. Yes, January we usually cook off something with like weight loss or habits or something, because that's usually the space where people are at. And just like always, it's packed in here in January, and then by March, it's like, well, I don't know. Everybody's got a lot of energy in January to do something different, right? And then it kind of, and then in the summer, you should see it then. I usually only come once during the summer. In fact, this year in May and July, I'm going to be here we're going to try it on Super Tuesday at night, like 5:30, I think is what we're doing. So whatever Super Tuesday is in May, that was when I wish Amber was here. In May and July, we're going to do that just for something different and just see what happens. I don't know about May, but I think in July, a lot of people are doing stuff for the weekends and the summers, and that's why, like July usually on a Saturday is like, well, and December, I don't even bother coming in December anymore. Everybody's doing holiday stuff. So, and nobody wants to talk about healthy stuff then. So we wait till first of the year for that. That's what you do. I have my own practice downtown, Catalyst Wellness Coaching, right downtown, a few doors from 808 Cheesecake, across from what will be the Children's Museum within the next year. So that'll be fun. And then I work part-time at a small clinic on the south side called the Doctor's Office, cash pay primary care clinic. We have NPs, chiropractors, PTs, OTs. I'm a licensed therapist as well, so I do some mental health and then nutrition there also. So if you're looking to get cash pay primary care, or if you have a super high deductible like me, it's probably cheaper for you potentially to go there and get stuff run, or meet with a doc there for about $100 as compared to, maybe going to see. Or if you're looking for an opinion outside the box a little bit, or somebody to brainstorm a little bit that's maybe going to give you some holistic suggestions as well as maybe more traditional, then that's a good place to go also. So it's right down from, it's on the same side as the job center, just down like a block south. So 75% of people that have a heart attack in the hospital have normal cholesterol by our sort of normal standards, which we're going to go into today, okay? 26% of people over the age of 40 in the United States are on a statin, or on a prescription statin now. It was not the case 20 years ago. Statins are a newer thing. So something's awry here, right? So if you look at the research over the last 10 years, you'll see that I think, and a lot of us in this room are over the age of 35, and so I think that the way we grew up, you might have grown up in the low-fat area, you might have in the diet soda area, the sugar-free, whatever. But really, I'm here to just kind of share really the latest research in the last decade on not only how to maybe eat and lifestyle stuff for good cholesterol, but how just looking at cholesterol and specifically your total cholesterol number is really not the way to go and as a predictor of cardiovascular disease. There's many other predictors. Is cholesterol and a piece of cholesterol one of those pieces? Absolutely, but it's not the piece you think. So that's what we'll go through today. I don't know if anybody has their cholesterol labs from Mercy or Dean on their phone, but there will be a point that I'll talk about numbers. And so if you want to look at yours or write them down, or I might ask for an example, I'm happy to go through someone's labs quick, like high level, like in the presentation. So if you want to look on your phone or if you have access to those, if anybody does, that'd be great. So by 2060, we'll have a 39% increase in diabetes, a 28% increase in people with diagnosed high blood pressure, 20% increase in obesity, heart disease, another 31%, stroke, another 34%. Those are all cardiovascular diseases, right? High cholesterol on its own does not cause heart disease, but we'll go through the other factors that do, because I would be remiss to talk about that cholesterol isn't a piece, but then not tell you what is, and then you have to leave wondering, well, what if it's not that, then, what the heck is it? Statins generate over $19 billion in sales every year. So some of this, as you can imagine, the drug piece is very money driven. Doctors often get kickbacks from prescribing statins, other drugs too. I will talk about how statins have their place though, and that they're not all bad. So I'm not here to bash statins either, but there's an appropriate use of them. The inflammation of your cholesterol and your arterial wall and the quality of your cholesterol matter more than how much of it you have, especially when we're talking total cholesterol numbers. So think quality and not quantity. And that is something in a traditional cholesterol panel, which we'll go through today, doesn't really test for. We don't really know the quality. You just get the numbers, right? And then you don't really know. And then if your number's over 200 total, then you get a statin and buy. That's it, right? And you should probably eat low fat, depending on how old your doctor is or what you're hearing there. So cholesterol is contained in every membrane, every cell membrane in the body. We need it for liver function. We really need it for sex hormone function. So ironically, if I see someone with a total cholesterol of under 150, I actually am concerned, or I will dig down and look at that. So low is not the way to go either. That either means they're on a statin, so usually I ask that, or if they're not, then historically, for men and for women, then I see issues with sex hormone production, low testosterone for men, and low estrogen and progesterone for women who are not old enough to have those lower numbers or lower issues. So these might be younger people in their 30s that have very low cholesterol. If your cholesterol, and sometimes I'd say these are people that are eating maybe an almost exclusive plant-based diet, which can contribute to super low cholesterol too. And with that comes low good cholesterol too, which isn't great. So we'll go through kind of each of the pieces today. So the notion that consuming foods in high cholesterol, that will alone promote heart disease, is a grossly inaccurate soundbite that I think a lot of us have heard for many decades. That disregards the critical role of cholesterol in your body and why we need it. Now, again, we're going to talk about quality and ratios and some other things here, but there's a huge piece that we're missing. And so cutting back on dietary cholesterol, let's say beef, can result in the liver producing actually more cholesterol, which I know sounds really whacked out. But your body is going to try to make up for what you don't get. And so sometimes that can drive your cholesterol numbers up. Cholesterol-lowering statin drugs override what your body does naturally in that sort of elegant balance of what your body is supposed to do at the cellular level. And so statins effectively do lower your cholesterol numbers. They do. But lower cholesterol, I'm here to say today, is not necessarily connected with decreasing cardiovascular risk. We just happen to have been laser focused on this one piece, and then everybody's freaked out about it. So moderating dietary cholesterol, so maybe that's like animal proteins, in effort to regulate your blood cholesterol is not only a fruitless effort, but can unnecessarily restrict you from eating highly nutritious foods. I see people that are so afraid to eat beef I'm just pulling that out. It could be something else, but usually it's beef. That their iron is low, their B12 is low, their D is low, and all the things that we get from, especially a good grass-fed, pasture-raised beef. And I'm not talking every day necessarily, but if I ask somebody how many times a week do you have beef, ground beef, steak, whatever, a lot of them are like, no, I try to stick with chicken because that's better. But you really are missing out on some of those key vitamins and minerals that we get from beef in particular. So, does anybody have any questions so far? I'm going to stop every once in a while because I know it's a lot. Yep.
What's the ideal number for cholesterol?
I will get to that. Actually, we're coming up on that. So I'll tell you just kind of. I'm going to say at least 150, and the total number honestly doesn't matter that much, but at least 150.
Another thing, how much beef can you eat a week? Because I'll stop eating.
As much as you want. You could eat beef every day. It depends on, that's the other thing. It depends on lots of other things and other numbers. So I would never start with a new client and just look at their cholesterol numbers without looking at an entire lab panel. So that's why it's important to step back and look big picture at your health and not just the cholesterol piece. 40 or 50 years ago, the cholesterol range, sort of the upper end of normal was 350. Right now it's 200.
Mine was still 30, so.
Yeah, so mine's 240. But I'll share my cholesterol numbers today if anybody doesn't have theirs. But again, the total is really I don't even honestly look at the total too much unless it's not enough. I'm looking at the other numbers within that, and that's what we'll kind of talk about today too. So let me go through the parts of the cholesterol, and most of you guys have heard of all these before. So LDLs, we usually hear this as the bad cholesterol, right? That's your low density lipoprotein. And so LDLs have a larger proportion of cholesterol to protein, and it makes them less dense, like fluffy. Think of them as like fluffy clouds. And so LDL is the package that carries cholesterol and a lot of other useful things to all of your cells to use. Your liver, your kidneys, all that stuff. But we think of that as the bad cholesterol, right? HDLs, or your high density, so if you think of high density, heavier, lipoprotein, these have larger proportion of protein to cholesterol. They weigh more. So HDL is the package that returns cholesterol back to your liver to recycle the processes within your body. Total cholesterol, which is the thing that we all hear about most, is that total number in the end that you were just asking about. Not super useful. The total cholesterol is really honestly not that super useful. So if you go home and you look at stuff after we talk today, I'd say look at your total and make sure it's enough, but then kind of look at the rest of the numbers. That's the stuff that matters more. Triglycerides, if you leave here today and you could remember one thing, I would have you look at your triglycerides. That is the first thing I look for as an inflammatory marker for cholesterol. That number does matter. Triglycerides are named for their structure. They're basically the fatty acids with a glycerol backbone, and so triglycerides are the main lipid in your blood. So that's your fatty blood then. And so if they are exceedingly high in the sample, it actually can even look, if you look at somebody's blood, if you did a lipid panel, it's really, it can be very cloudy if you have high fat in your blood. And so the primary driver of chronic high triglycerides is consumption of too much energy, calories, in the form of carbohydrates and sugars. I don't mean sweet potatoes or baked potatoes. I mean Pop-Tarts and cookies and crackers and donuts. I have so many people that come in that are so afraid to eat potatoes, but they're eating sugar-free Pop-Tarts. So, and we'll talk about kind of whole singular ingredient foods today because that's the name of the game. High triglycerides are correlated with one of the biggest threats to your cardiovascular health, metabolic syndrome. Along with other things though. It's like one of a list of 5, which I'll give you today. I'm afraid she's not recording. Oh, there she is. So to get a good picture of metabolic health, you'll want to look at your triglycerides and your HDLs in particular. And I'm going to go over the ratio today, but those are the two you want to look at. And I'll give you numbers for those. So back to the LDL and HDL thing just a little bit. Large, fluffy, cloud-like LDLs, right? Buoyant, They float. This type of cholesterol is formed when your blood levels of triglycerides and insulin are low. And so LDLs are generally harmless, even in high concentrations, if they are light and fluffy. However, in the presence of other risk factors, high insulin, high A1C, if you are overweight, if you smoke, and if you have high blood pressure, your LDLs are likely then oxidized or in poor health. So again, we're talking about the quality of your LDLs, and I'll tell you how to figure that out. The quality of your LDLs, not how many you have of them. If you have thousands of them, but they're all light and fluffy, it's no big deal. You could have LDLs under 100, which is sort of the standard of what we traditionally kind of look for, and you could be a walking heart attack mess because yours could be oxidized and not in good shape, especially if you have those other 4 risk factors I just talked about. If you have high cholesterol, so I have high cholesterol, like if you were to look at a traditional sense, I have none of the other risk factors. And my triglycerides and HDLs, I'll go over it in a second, are great. They're great. They're perfect. They're 1-to-1 ratio, which is what we look for. And so I'm at super minimal heart attack risk, even though we have heart disease in my family. But someone might look at my total cholesterol and be like, oh, she should be on a statin. I've had that number since I was like 22, so that's always kind of interesting too. My cholesterol has never changed. So, but that fluffy cloud-like LDL that's super healthy can oxidize easily if you have some of those other risk factors. So it can become, let's picture like broken, oxidized, or like if you picture like nice fluffy clouds and they're still fluffy, but they're like in parts, in the sky, like that's not what you want. So you want, large, fluffy, intact clouds. Think of that as your LDLs. Okay, then the HDLs, which we talked about, a lot of times we call that good cholesterol. Oh, I'm sorry, your small dense LDLs. That's what you don't want. So if you think of clouds versus pebbles, so there's 2 types of LDLs. There's fluffy and then small and dense. If you think of pebbles with LDLs, that's what you don't want, the small and dense. If you want to find out if your LDLs are over 140, 130, which is usually the cutoff for like what's good and bad, I think mine are in the 140s, you can get what's called an NMR test, and you can ask your doctor for that. I can run one too. A lot of times your insurance won't cover it. If you have insurance, they won't run it unless you meet unless your LDLs are high enough. But I'm here to say that you could run an NMR at any number of LDLs or any level. But like if I went and asked for one, I think my insurance would cover because my number is high enough. My LDLs are 141 or something like that. I don't meet any of the other criteria, so I'm not sure about that, but nobody knows how insurance works these days. Anyway, so I don't know. But your insurance, if you have some of the other risk factors and your LDLs are above 140, some are like 130, 120 even, then a lot of times you can run what's called an NMR test, and that will test the quality of your LDLs. And there's a calcium marker and some other things in there too, and kind of tell you like for real what's going on. Then you need somebody that's able to interpret that, of course. So the total amount of your LDLs, again, matters less than are they light and fluffy? Are they small and dense? Okay, so quality versus quantity for sure. Yep.
Mention again what the 4 factors are that have to cause problems.
Yep, I'm going to hit them again actually. High insulin. So if you want to find out what your insulin is, you can do an A1C, but I actually like a fasted insulin marker, and that should be 10 or under. You'll see the range go from 1 to 25, but I would say 10 and under is like where you want to be. So fasting insulin. High triglycerides, which I talked about. I'll give you a number today. Definitely over 150. Triglycerides over 150 are not great. I've seen people with triglycerides in there like 500-600s. Not good. most often I'm seeing people in the 200-300s. Between 1 and 150, I would say is like maybe not ideal, but not something to be alarmed about. But definitely that 150 marker, I'd say for triglycerides, that's number 2. Number 3, if you are overweight, don't use the BMI all the time for if you are overweight or not. Most of us don't have access to like a body fat caliper, but like that is really the best way to look. I know tons of bodybuilders in the gym who are considered overweight and their body fat's like 4%. So you just go on weight because muscle weighs more than fat. We don't really know. For men, it would be the largest measurement, like around your belly. If that's more than 38, then that's usually like not great. For women, it's 35. So and that's where most of us tend to like put it on, is in the belly, even if you are not overweight. So let me give you an example. You could have someone, I see a lot of men who are not overweight, but they're, I would say, underweight over fat. Does that make sense? We sometimes think of it as like skinny fat. So that means you're lacking the muscle. Maybe you only weigh 170 or 180 pounds. That's a 5'10" guy. But if all your fat is visceral, like belly fat, it's same with women, but that's not good. I most often see that in men though, especially over the age of 50. Let me look at the other, because I have another list of 5 here. Remind me, I'll look at your other 5 when we get back, but those are the ones I would say. Those would be the big ones I would say. Obsessing over one blood reading also for anything is just not a good idea. So even if we're looking at blood sugar, right, we're going to look at your fasting glucose, which, by the way, make sure your labs are fasting, you guys. Otherwise, they're not super accurate. I had a woman I worked with, and she did not appear to be pre-diabetic or diabetic to me, and her fasting, it listed her fasting glucose was 135. So we want your glucose to be between 70 and 100, right? And I said, geez, like your fasting glucose is really high. And she said, oh yeah. Like, I said, did you eat anything that morning? She's like, oh yeah, I had a muffin, like before I got my blood drawn. I'm like, well, there you go, I went through this in last May on just reading labs, like all of your labs, not just cholesterol. Some labs require fasting really for an accurate result. Some don't. Instead of worrying about all that, just fast. And then you know that everything's good to go. 12 hours fasting, water only, no coffee, no vigorous exercise, and no vitamins for 24 hours prior. Why? Because if you're getting a vitamin D lab and you just took vitamin D, then it's going to look amazing, but maybe it's not. But if you just popped it, then it's running through your blood.
So that's no vitamins. How about prescriptions?
Prescriptions, it depends on the prescription. Usually those are good. Yep. Usually those are good. If you take your prescription set of as needed, but we just don't want you to, if you're getting vitamin panels, let's say a vitamin B12 panel or a D, we don't want you to take those vitamins the morning of, even the night before.
Does that make a difference for the basic blood tests?
So it depends on what you mean by basic blood tests, because what I think of as basic blood tests is 3 times as much as most people are getting run. So a CBC should be fasted, a metabolic panel should be fasted, lipids, B, D, iron, thyroid. I'd fast for all those.
That should be 24 hours.
Fast for 12 hours, but no vitamins for 24 before. But stay on your prescriptions.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, some of them don't affect, but instead of having to piece that all together, whatever, just go in the morning and fast overnight for 12 hours. It's not a big deal. And then you get just a clean, idea of what's. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Or let's say you have a doctor's appointment at 2 p.m. and they call in labs. Wait till the next morning and go and do those. Or some will let you do it the morning of or the day before. Like they'll call them in and then you can. That's the way I prefer it, because then you can discuss it at the appointment as opposed to just like a my chart, message back and forth. So heart disease catalysts are high insulin, high triglycerides, excess cortisol, which we haven't talked about yet. I have talked about that. I think 2 years ago I came and talked about that. That's your stress hormone. That can affect everything. That is what causes holding belly fat right here too, visceral fat, high stress hormone. I see it more often with women than men. If you haven't had your cortisol tested, saliva is really the best way to do that. So I do that with people too. I usually do it in conjunction with the hormone panel because there's a couple where it's all included and it doesn't cost much, but it's just, I call it like a spit test, but you just, spit into a tube right away when you wake up in the morning, twice during the day, and right before you go to bed. I work with a lot of women who can't sleep. And so I'm testing the cortisol often to see if their cortisol is high before they go to bed. It's usually a combination of that and low estrogen if you are of a certain age. So that makes you not sleep. Another issue and a heart disease catalyst is not enough HDLs. So I see this too, good cholesterol. So I have a person in my family who has low cholesterol, 146. I told you, not a fan of that, not great, right? But the triglycerides are like 150, which is borderline. So there's just a high percentage of that person's cholesterol, because their cholesterol is not very high, that is not great because of the high triglycerides. And the HDLs were like in the 30s, and that's not good either. So you want your HDLs, that comes from like your omega-3s and your fish oils and your flax, and we'll talk about that. And I like it at least 50 for men and women, even closer to 60 for women, to be honest, because that usually eases perimenopause and menopause symptoms, but at least 50. But I see people in the 30s a lot, like 20s and 30s. Another heart disease catalyst, which of course is why I'm in business, is poor diet. And I think we all have different ideas of what that looks like, and I won't go into that as much today. But again, I just want you eating singular ingredient foods, spices aside, right? So your eggs, your beef, your pork, your chicken, your turkey, your fish, seafood, all your fruits, all your vegetables, including white potatoes, sweet potatoes, plantains, the starchy ones, all good. But if that is most of your diet, maybe some nuts and seeds on the side, and let's throw in a cup of coffee for kicks, you're good. It also makes your diet really simple. You don't have to worry about what to eat. I have people that come to me and ask, what should I not eat? And I'm like, I'd rather talk about what you should eat. And that makes it easy because it's really just a couple food groups. It's all of your produce, unless obviously you have allergies, or maybe if you have a connective tissue disease, then you might have issues with nightshades like peppers and tomatoes. But again, I'm just saying generally, all of your produce, fruits and vegetables, more vegetables than fruits in a day. I usually say a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you have 2 servings of vegetables, 1 serving of fruit, 4 servings of vegetables, 2 servings of fruit, that's usually what I shoot for, is 4 and 2. A serving of vegetables is usually half a cup. Same with fruit. So it's not very much either. So you might be at dinner getting 2, 3, 4 servings of vegetables without even knowing it. Except for greens, like salad, that's 3 cups. Because 1 cup of greens is nothing. That's like barely a side salad. So, but those are the other, kind of risk factors. Let's go through a few more. So let's talk numbers for a second. Total cholesterol, you kind of asked that. I like at least 150, but the number honestly doesn't really matter that much. So I hate to even give you like an upper limit, but you could be in the 300s easily and potentially be okay. A caveat without getting into major detail. I work with people with autoimmune disease pretty regularly. Lupus in particular, but also RA and fibro. Those people tend to have higher triglycerides and cholesterol because of the inflammation of their body. So an inflammatory diagnosis or general inflammation in your body can also cause high cholesterol. It could be nothing to do with your lifestyle and what you're eating. And with some people, I see that pretty often. I just worked with a woman who had that. I mean, diet could not be cleaner, and the triglycerides were very high, and it was nothing that she was eating or doing. And so then my response to her was to go back and control the inflammation from the autoimmune condition. That was kind of kicking that up. So that's, again, why we just don't look at your cholesterol and decide how healthy you are. We look at all of your blood panels and your whole health and your lifestyle and how you're sleeping and all those other things. Okay. LDLs, again, potentially don't really matter that much either, like the number. And I know that's wild, but traditionally I believe the cutoff is around 100. But you could have higher LDLs in the 130s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, like upper 100s, really. Over 200 a lot of times, then that might be like an inflammatory marker. But again, it doesn't mean you're overweight or you have, necessarily a heart condition. It could be from an autoimmune or something. In fact, that's what makes me look at some of the other stuff. But remember, it's the quality of your LDLs. Are they the clouds or the pebbles? You want the clouds and no broken clouds. Blood pressure is another one. That's another risk factor. See a lot of people on blood pressure meds too. One of the things that happens when I put people on a whole foods diet, for better or for worse, people's blood pressure comes down so fast that actually, if they are still taking meds, I've had a couple people pass out. And so you really have to be careful if you're transitioning from a diet that is like definitely not whole foods. If you're going from Burger King to sweet potatoes, like, you know, go for it, but be careful because it will naturally bring your blood pressure way down. If you have high cortisol and high stress, that can cause your blood pressure to be up too. Again, not just food, not everything's just one thing. Hypertension puts excessive stress on your cardiovascular system and increases your disease risk. High blood pressure is a reliable indicator of unhealthy dietary, exercise, and lifestyle habits, usually. But it can be from stress or other things also. So we usually, and this is where I'll agree with the number, like 120 over 80 is usually decent. Then you have people like me. I'm not even 90 over 60 when I wake up, and so I'm dizzy. Yeah, I was looking at you because I was like, it's like thin Caucasian females over the age of 50. Like, it's not cool. That's not cool either. I have POTS too, so mine's like up and down. But like low blood pressure, while healthy, is not all it's cracked up to be either, I would say. So, yeah, did you have a question?
I have a problem with my blood pressure. I'm pre-diabetic too.
So you have a high A1C? Mm-hmm.
Well, I started having a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar
Yep, I like that.
before breakfast.
Yeah, I like that.
And it dropped my blood pressure so low.
Yeah.
And I had to stop taking
It got your blood pressure too low?
it.
Yes, right.
Very
Yeah,
low.
so that's one of the interventions I use too. We'll talk about berberine a little bit today for blood pressure and blood sugar, but like, yeah, so I use apple cider vinegar or lemon juice sometimes.
Or lemon juice.
Yep, that's what I have electrolytes and lemon in my water right now. So, we can talk about blood pressure as a whole different thing, but just let me dispel something else with blood pressure that'll drive you guys batty. Really, salt is not that big of a deal either. So, if you have high blood pressure, unless you are in renal failure or there's something going on, you really like Himalayan sea salt that you would find out in basics. I'm not saying Burger King either. I'm talking like high quality salt on your food is not that big of a deal. Conversely, if you have low blood pressure, you want to get as much water and as much salt in your body as possible. I usually try to get 1,000 milligrams before noon because I want to fill my blood vessels up and get my heart pumping a little bit. That's why I talk about how I was always cold. That's why my hands and feet are always cold, because I have poor circulation from low blood pressure. If you prick my finger, nothing barely comes out. Isn't that wild? So I can't do finger prick tests for like blood samples. My vein, I'm fine because it's higher up, but like my fingers are, I get like this drop and it's like everything I can do to like get a drop of blood off my finger. I won't bleed out. I'll be good that way. So, okay. Triglycerides under 150, under 100 is amazing, but let's just say under 150. HDL is at least 50, right? Wish I had a chalkboard. It's back there. I'm not going to drag it out. Let's talk about ratio for a second. Really ideal ratio between HDL and triglycerides would be 1 to 1. So my HDLs are 70 and my triglycerides are 72. So that's what I was talking about. My total height, my total cholesterol is a problem apparently, but like my ratio is really good. Up to 1 to 3. Meaning, let's just use quick, easy math. Your HDLs could be 50, which is like borderline decent, and your triglycerides could be 150, borderline decent, and that would be okay. So 1 to 3 ratio, HDL to triglycerides. That's what we want. Up to 1 to 3. 1 to 1, 1 to 2 would be even better. If they're upside down, then that's usually an issue too. So, vitamin D. Every time I am here talking about whatever topic it is, I always address vitamin D because it has to do with everything. Standard ranges in the doctor's office are 30 to 100, ideal 70 to 100 for most of us. So just make sure how many people in here actively take an active vitamin D3 supplement, not D2. And do you know if it has K2 in it? Let's say you have a blood clotting disorder. K2 is what you want in the D3 to help it absorb.
MK7.
What?
And the MK7? K2 with the MK7?
That's okay too, but just a K. Basically a K2 or an MK7 is fine too. Magnesium's not bad too. But usually, and a lot of times, it's all like sold together, like it's just a capsule or whatever. The second issue I see with vitamin D is most people are like, oh yeah, I take my vitamin D. How much do you take? 1,000 milligrams. Probably not enough. So moderate dose of vitamin D for most people that I work with, about 5,000. I take 10. I take 10 during the winter months. For me, generally ballpark Halloween to Easter. Yesterday I was like, whoa, I can because yesterday was gorgeous. So I was like, oh, I'll just take less. So yesterday I took 5 because I was like, oh, it's summer. And then it was fake spring yesterday and now it's winter today again. So I took 10.
Vitamin D?
What?
Are you talking about vitamin E?
Vitamin D.
D.
Yep, D3. D3 is your animal-based protein, most bioavailable. If you get super low vitamin D, they will script you D2 in a high dose, and I'm not as much a fan for that. It takes quite a while for that to absorb. They're going to give you 50,000 units once a week, and it's just hard to absorb up that all at once. I would rather you take 10,000 every day, so that's 70, but D3, K2 for sure. Test, don't guess. If you are not sure what your vitamin D levels are, go get them tested. Most often that's not an insurance issue, but don't take it the morning of, like I said. So just skip the 24 hours before and see where your baseline is at. Then you'll know how much to take based on that. Usually under 40 or 50, I have people load up, depending on the time of the year, at 10,000. Again, depending on your other health factors, so I want to be careful not to shoot out numbers here too much, but if you're over 50, then a lot of times like a 5,000 dose, depending on what you're already taking. If you've been taking 5,000 your whole life and your level is only at 50, then I'll probably have you take more. If you haven't taken anything and your level's at 50, which would be pretty unheard of, then 5,000 might be good. Everybody absorbs it differently too. I have a pool at home. I've told this story before. And this past summer, I thought, my gosh, I'm in that pool every morning. Like I try to start my day with a ton of natural sunlight, 30 minutes, get a nice tan. I thought, well, I'm not going to take my vitamin D this summer and see what happens. So last summer, I had to get tested for some hormone stuff I was doing. It was like the end of August. So I should have, that's like 3 months of a lot of sun, right? And so I hadn't taken vitamin D that whole summer and mine was only 50. And even the practitioner I was working with said, ooh, your vitamin D is not good. And I thought, what? Sure enough, that was why. So the best way to absorb vitamin D is the sun. Most of us don't get enough. And some of us are out there a lot and we still don't absorb it. It depends on your genetic, makeup, depends on your gut, like all that stuff. So that night I popped right back on my 5,000 summer dose of vitamin D. So 5 and 10 for most people, like seasonally is where I see it, but it just depends on how you absorb it. So test, don't guess, and see what it is. I would guarantee that, it sounds like most of you are taking it, but are you taking enough? So go home and, does anybody know how much they're taking?
5,000.
5? Okay, that's good.
2,500 because my last visit told me I was getting up there and could get kidney stones because mine was too high.
So how high was yours?
I think it's been 6 months, so I think it was like 8.
Yeah, and so I would say that's perfect, but I don't know, all of your health history too. So,
No.
but yeah, drink enough water if you have kidney stuff. Okay, so that triglyceride to HDL ratio, blood pressure, vitamin D, fasting blood insulin, you can ask for that, is under 10. A1C, most of you know what that is. Fasting glucose under 100. A1C, 5.6 or less. So if you're over 5.6, pre-diabetic, over 6.4, closer to 8, diabetic. Triglycerides we talked about. You can, if you really want to know what's going on, and if you have higher total cholesterol or higher LDLs, in addition to the NMR test, you can ask for something called a coronary calcium test. Sometimes it's included in that NMR test. That'll tell you how hardened your arterial walls are. You may or may not be able to get that through your doctor, more insurance-wise, like they can order it, but they might give you grief.
Pay $49 and get it right here first.
Right, so that's not bad. Yeah, and I send people we do at the doctor's office, we do it for $50. At the Deerfield Naturopathic Clinic, they do for $50. Just do it. Like, if you have to pay out of pocket. What?
What was that?
Coronary calcium test. Yep.
Can I add something?
It's a CT scan.
Doctors at Mercy, they won't just do that. I waited 4 years to get them to finally admit that they would give me that I can get that test. And I still had to pay for it, $49, but they still wouldn't even give me because.
Like order it? Yeah,
This word.
right.
So,
Sometimes that's an issue. That's what I mean. But don't wait for your insurance to tell you what you can do. Like if you want it, then that's why I'm giving you the resources too. The doctor's office on the south side and the Deerfield Naturopathic Clinic. You can go and get you can go and get labs for
What's it called again? Coronary?
calcium, coronary calcium. Calcium. Yep. So that's a buildup of your arteries. I mean, that essentially is heart disease right there, you know.
they told me I couldn't get it unless, well, first of all, high cholesterol, okay. But then I had one other family person, my family member had something like heart disease or high cholesterol or something else.
Yeah.
Or maybe we have to get the test.
Right.
For $49.
For $49, yeah, right, right.
I'm getting mine next week, actually, from my friend here.
Yeah. I know. It's crazy.
I was diagnosed coronary disease 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was advised to take statins.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in red meat.
Mm-hmm.
I was, because of cholesterol.
Yep.
I used to eat a lot of steaks.
And now I'm here telling you to eat some beef and get off your statin, right? But you have to change all of your. Oh, okay. I was gonna say you got to change your lifestyle too, and all the other
My
stuff.
insurance advised me not to take it.
Interesting. We rarely, and by rarely I mean like 1 in 500, script statins at the doctor's office on the south side for people that come in with cholesterol and metabolic issues. We use berberine, we use bergamot, we use all these other things. I'm going to go through a couple with you today. Super rare. Maybe if you had a triple bisass or some other, like I said, there's some uses for statins, but they're not for just lowering your cholesterol. We can use it for other things. They're exploring the use of actually low-dose lovastatin for methane small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which I have had most of my life. And so I'm interested in that piece, but I don't want it to touch my cholesterol, but it won't be at the dose to be able to affect my cholesterol, basically. But there's something with how it impacts certain bacteria, like in the gut. So off-label low doses of meds can be fabulous for other things. Just like side note, like restless legs, sometimes a low dose antidepressant, but not enough to affect your mood. I'm talking like a tiny, tiny little bit. Sometimes we do for restless legs. So I'm a fan of stuff like that. I think that's great. I would also argue getting your vitamin D up would help that too. Restless leg. Yeah. So we see a lot of that too, which is another reason people can't sleep. So the health movement of statins, asserting that a blanket strategy, if we just reduce your cholesterol, you'll be healthy, is sort of a mess, in my opinion. I also assert that it messes with your head a little bit, because then you get a report back that says your cholesterol is lower, so you're like, I'm great. And then you don't change any of your lifestyle habits, and you don't do anything else. You don't pick up activity, you don't drop weight, you don't eat whole foods, you don't drink enough water, you don't watch your stress and your sleep, because you're like, well, I'm good now, but you're not. And so it's like this fake, like, yeah, it's like fake, you know. And then there's side effects of statins too. So I'm glad you didn't do that. I'm going to go into that next. And it's not to scare you from doing it, but it's just to give you like the reality of like statins help us in heart disease about 1% of the time. And so most of us, I don't think, want to endure the side effects of the statins for the 1% of the time that it might help us with heart stuff. And I'd rather have you do lifestyle stuff and some fish oil or, you know, like some other things. Statins suppress the production of cholesterol in the liver, producing lower blood values on that piece of paper that you'll get, including your HDLs, which I just told you we want to be at least 50. So they bring everything down. So your ratios could still be messed up. Like the example I just gave you with a family member I have, the total cholesterol is 146, but the triglycerides are 150 and the HDLs are like 30 something, right? So I see that with people on statins. I can almost tell somebody's on a statin if I look at them and then look at their blood work. I'm like, you must be on a statin. My mom's on a statin. Like it's low, you know, it gets just low, like the ratios get off. So it can interfere with healthy serotonin balance. It's like mild depression, less energy, loss of muscle. For women in particular, bone fragmentation, and so osteoporosis. If you are over the age of 50 as a woman and you haven't gotten a bone density test, I would highly recommend that. Most insurance covers that over the age of 50, period. I've had 2. And so looking at that is important too. So it also hampers vitamin D synthesis. So if you're sitting out in the sun, if you're taking a vitamin D, it just doesn't process as well, and so then your vitamin D stays low, and we know across the board that that's, not a good idea. It can mess with critical just hormone processes and conversion of certain hormones, and so that's not great either. Those are just at least some of the highlights anyways. Long term, finally getting kind of research on that, but statins can cause inflammation in your liver. They also deplete CoQ10, which is critical, needed in the body, that helps like muscle function. And so that's why I brought that here today. If anybody is actually on a statin, you should be on CoQ10 at least, like with it, because it's depleting your CoQ10, at least 200 milligrams a day. I would say 100 milligrams AM and PM. So again, the statins also they're kind of lowering everything, but a lot of times they're not impacting triglycerides. They're just lowering that total cholesterol, but like they don't always impact triglycerides, and that's the big one I want you to look at. When you leave here today and you go look at your cholesterol, you look at your triglycerides and see if they're under 150. And then, like I said, they might lower your HDLs, which isn't great either. So let's talk about, like, again, back to some of the catalysts of overall heart disease, and then maybe some things to take or do. I made a list here. Yeah. And so omega-3 fats are health promoting due to their anti-inflammatory effect. Most people I work with I have on omega-3s. Lesser levels are really good, and I feel like I'm putting them on a lot of supplements. Then I'll say, hey, that's optional. We're going to sample them at the end. If you want, I'll open this bottle. If you don't like the idea, even it's lemon flavored, of taking fish oil on a tablespoon, this one tastes pretty good. But if you don't like the idea, then there's like capsules. This is one I take. If you get a fish oil capsule and you are burping it up and it doesn't taste good, because that's why some people are like, I don't want to take that, it's disgusting. Couple things. You may have reflux, and then that's not good. And the cause of your reflux is likely low stomach acid, and then you have gut issues. So if you're burping that up, then it could be something that's going on in your body. 2, if you got it from Amazon or somewhere else and it's been sitting on the cupboard for who knows long, it's probably rancid. And so then that can make that fishy taste too. Because the capsule, if it's not in a good gel, cap 2 will break down too early. Basically, you want to break down here and not in your esophagus, so you taste it. And it is gross if you've ever had it happen. I've had it happen. A trick that you can do, first of all, you can get smaller capsules if you want. Second of all, you can put them in the freezer. And so then it takes longer for them to like open up and kind of break down, or you could take them with a meal, or you could pop them in your mouth and go to bed if you fall asleep fast. If you don't, then. But those are options kind of for the fish oil. But fish oil is good to go. So that's found in oily, like salmon, sardines, like oily cold water fish. But most of us don't eat a lot of that, or not enough of it. In the absence of a high carbohydrate, and I'm not here to bash carbohydrates, but I'm going to say high processed carbohydrate diet, saturated fat is an efficient, clean, burning energy source for the body. Am I saying to go home and eat a pound of bacon? No, but I actually would rather you eat higher fat natural foods than the sugar-free Pop-Tart thing that I talked about. So just eat whole foods, singular ingredient foods. It doesn't mean you can't eat a soup or a casserole. You put all those whole foods together. But just keep it simple. That makes it easier for cooking too, so you don't need all these complicated recipes. Roast some beets and some baby red potatoes and throw a steak on the grill, and there's dinner. I mean, 3 ingredients, that's it. Use a good quality olive oil, some salt, pepper. So remember, your catalysts are going to be like your high insulin, your triglycerides, cortisol, and not enough HDL. LDL cholesterol readings, that bad cholesterol that could be fluffy or could be pebbles, are minimally relevant to heart disease risk, same as your that total number that we go off of. And so, like I said, many heart attack victims have LDL values considered in the safe range. Your HDL is like your garbage truck. That's what cleans up everything, sort of along the way. And so you want a big garbage truck, not a small one. So you want high HDLs. And so that cleanses the arteries, cleans up things in the bloodstream. So you want a big garbage truck and light fluffy clouds in your body, if you want to remember that. And so we talked about ratios a little bit. So let me go through a few, maybe diet I've covered mostly, but a couple supplement suggestions that I use often instead of statins. Lifestyle stuff is sleep, quality and quantity, rest, vitamin D, nature, sunshine, lowered stress, or let's just say like better management of stress. You might have, I see people with a ton of stress in their life and their cortisol is not high because they're managing it. So I don't want to say like lower the stress in your life, but you got to figure out how to manage what you have. There's some people that I feel like are just sort of like on fire all the time. There's something going on all the time. And so that might be a lifestyle you chose. It may not be, but you got to figure out a way to like take care of yourself within that, within the crazy. Eat singular ingredient, whole foods. Make as much as you can yourself. I'm not saying never go out to eat. Maybe choose where you go out to eat and how often. If you're hitting Culver's 3 days a week, it's probably not good. You know, not that there's not a couple healthier options at Culver's. By the way, I was sharing this story with somebody just this week because it just happened to me this week. I can't remember the last time I had fast food. I bet 20 years. But we are all this close from getting a burger at Culver's because that's how close I was. My son's birthday was Tuesday. And so we had already taken to this football game, and so I didn't really like get him anything, but I was like, I'm going to get him some ice cream. So I pull into Culver's. My window is down because it's nicer. It was Monday or Tuesday. Monday. It was nice on Monday. And immediately I smell the smell of the burgers and the fries. And it's 11:15 in the morning and I haven't eaten yet because I usually fast and my first meal is usually breakfast between 11 and 11:30. I just hadn't eaten yet. And right away I was like, wow, that smells amazing, right? I haven't had fast food in 2 decades. And all I had to do was roll my window down and go in there. I had to go in, not through the drive-thru, which maybe would have been safer, but I had to go in because they have all these hand-packed like ice cream flavors and I just wanted to get one. So I'm like, and I had to see somebody and whatever. I'm like, okay, get in and get out. But I was like, oh my gosh, like it's not even noon and I could, smell that. And it's crazy like how fast I wanted a burger. Just, I put myself like in that situation. So that's the other thing I would say. If you don't buy it, then it's not in your house to eat. If you don't go out to eat, then you can't have the French fries. I'm not saying never have a French fry. I'm not saying that either. But I'm just saying like minimize your exposure so you don't have to make a bad decision because you're not there. So then I get past that and I have to open this thing of ice cream. And well, that looks amazing. I could eat ice cream every day. Like that looks great. And I always get the little cheeky ice cream here, by the way, because it's like 4 ingredients or less, most of them, and they're handmade here, and there's non-dairy options if you want. And usually I can make one of those, like, I think it's a pint, last like a week. And they're really good and pretty like rich. So I just kind of, it's really not good to sit with that container and take a little bit out because you're like, oh, that's 3 days right there, But so then I opened the thing though, and it's got, and like peach, they had like a peach cobbler one. I was giving him like a chocolate something. So I got one. But what helped me and what sometimes helps me, and again, I could have had ice cream. It wouldn't have been a big deal. If you go to Cold Stone and they give you samples, I always take a sample and I always take a bite of my husband's and each of my kids' ice cream. And then I don't get any, but I at least, you try it. If somebody offered me a bite, I would have took it. But I knew if I took that whole container home, I'd probably eat it. But what helped me is to look at the back of the ingredients. And it was just a long list of crap. And I'm like, you know what? No, I don't need this. If I want ice cream, I'll come here and get it today when I get my groceries. So sometimes, and obviously I've been doing this like long enough that just looking at that label was enough to like actually turn me off, even though I'm sure it tastes amazing. Okay, so things to do when you leave here. Manage your cardiac risk. Some omega-3 supplement. Check out your blood pressure. And if it's not ideal, that's probably a whole nother talk, but that's the stuff that you do to manage your cardiac risk and cholesterol stuff is the same thing that I would have you do for your blood pressure in general. So there are natural ways to lower your blood pressure that are not a pill. You may be on a low dose blood pressure pill for something else, by the way, and that's not what I'm talking about. Like I said, there's other reasons for that too. Look at your triglycerides. Are they over 150? I don't have this out here, but bergamot is probably my favorite supplement for just cardiac risk in general that improves your cholesterol profile. And I mean improves, not lowers everything. Over time, it'll take at least 3 months. You got to take it regularly. I know we have some out there. Bergamot, I'd say 500 to 1500 milligrams a day. So if you're looking for amounts. CoQ10, which we talked about, 1 to 300 milligrams a day. If you have major issues, maybe you take the upper end of some of these things. Just follow the directions on the bottle. If you're just looking for general health stuff or you're kind of borderline, then maybe you take something on the lower end. I told you CoQ10 is depleted when you take a statin. Maybe if your LDLs are high, you get an NMR test or that coronary calcium test. Maybe you do. I really like magnesium glycinate before you go to bed because it helps with relaxation and sleep and cortisol. Magnesium glycinate in general helps with absorption of all this other stuff too. You don't have to take it at the same time necessarily, but I just sort of like that as a general supplement. For managing blood sugar, that's the insulin component that has to do with cardiac disease. I like chromium, 400 to 800 milligrams of that. Usually they're in 200 milligram tablets. Alpha linoleic acid, ALA, you can write that down and look it up. Probably 200 to 600 milligrams of that. And then berberine, and if you're just going to pick one for blood sugar, this would be the one I would pick if you don't want to do all the other things I said. These are 500 milligram capsules, 1 in the morning, 1 at night, 1,000 a day. Berberine. Yep, you can come look at it after too, so you can take pictures of any of this stuff if you want. Berberine I take when I have a flare-up with my intestinal overgrowth, so it's good for like antimicrobial too, but it's really good for blood sugar. Not everybody needs to go home and like count carbs and do all this stuff, but if I were to give you a general suggestion, if you want to play around with the idea of getting about 100 carbs or less, that might be a really good trial for 30 days. See what that is. Without eating or drinking sugar-free products. Unsweetened, but not sugar-free. So ideally, if you can't do that, then start with just 100 carbs period with your, 4 Diet Cokes or whatever. But like, because the sugar-free thing's a whole nother thing as far as like inflammation. But try 100 carbs a day. That's not keto. That's not crazy low. That's like manageable for most people. Unless you need to put on weight or unless you have other things. But then your calories should come from your protein first, and then your fats second. I don't do super low carb diets with people either, so that's not what I'm saying, because I think they're not sustainable. I think they're hard to sustain. And so when I construct like meal plans for people, I usually don't have anybody much lower than like 70, and I don't do net carbs either, 70 total carbs a day. I don't think I've done anybody less than that, and I have people up to 160 or 170. I sit at about 140, 150. That's where I feel good. But I also get the same number of grams of protein. So if you have been to any of my protein talks, and this will blow your mind because you'll be like, how in the heck am I going to do that? I suggest 1 gram of protein per ideal body weight. For women, I don't go over 150 milligrams though, just because sometimes it's good and you could, but then people get frustrated and give up. So it's like hard to sustain. So if you are female, I would focus on getting at least 100 grams of protein and see how that rolls. So a minimum of 100 grams of protein, a maximum of 100 carbs, and then fill the rest in with your fats and just see how that rolls. That can be putsy for people, like counting all that. I have a lot of men at about 200 grams of protein, 180, 200. Guys are bigger. But depends on how big you are, depends on how old you are. So I don't throw out like exact numbers, but just it's usually our more processed food that's driving some of this stuff. And so if you try to eat 100 carbs a day or less and you don't get enough protein, you're gonna be hungry. You're gonna be really hungry. So that's why I say like get the protein and the fiber and like some of the other stuff in there. I didn't mention quinoa, but I really like that as like just a food in general too. That's a singular ingredient food, but it's a seed and not a grain, and it's got really good fiber and protein. I don't do grains for a lot of people actually. My diets they're just kind of minimal because I'd rather go with really whole foods. Like even oats are at least somewhat processed. But if you are going to get oats, a really good brand, and I don't know if we have it here, but it's Bob's Red Meal protein oats. And it's literally just oats, but it has 9 grams of protein in a third of a cup as opposed to 2.5. And so it's a great way. So you could mix like a third of a cup of oats in with maybe like a protein powder or something and make like an oatmeal or like an overnight oats, strawberries or something like that. Have like a good meal ready to go. My favorite yogurt here is Siggy's, the non-fat plain. If you are used to eating Oreo yogurt with sprinkles on it, it's going to taste like really tart because it's like literally just one ingredient yogurt, has all the probiotics in it. But so then maybe you put like a whole bunch of fruit on it or like flax seeds, some other things, or maybe you put it in a smoothie. There's a vanilla, like a full fat vanilla one. That one's really good. That one tastes like vanilla custard to me. And so it's a little more sugar, but not bad, not close to the Oreo sprinkle one. I have some clients that mix them 50-50. They're like, oh, I'd really like you to somehow custom the taste for the non-fat or the plain one. I don't care about the fat part, but the plain one. And they're like, well, but I really like the vanilla. I'm like, why don't you try to mix them 50-50 and make a parfait? And then sometimes that's the way people do it. There's the drinkable Siggy's drinks here too. Another good brand I've seen at Target, not here. It's called Too Good. I can't remember if it's TOO Good or the number 2 Good, but they're little, I think they're like 10 or 15 grams of protein, like little mini, like just yogurt drinks. And they're very minimal ingredients. I have not had cottage cheese in 25 years because I haven't done dairy in a long time because of my gut. And so I'm starting to reintroduce lactose-free dairy products to see how I feel. I usually don't even do those for people because most people I work with have gut issues or autoimmune. And so I usually pull cow's milk dairy completely. But for some people who just have digestion issues or are healthy otherwise, a lactose-free cottage cheese could be another idea, like another protein idea that's not eating a whole cow. I have, if you guys want to scan this, I have a free 2-week meal plan, Whole Foods meal plan for you. My cards are up here. If you want a free phone consult and you have not done a consult before and I'm not already working with you, go ahead and just write your info down and I will send you a text message. We'll set up a time to talk for a half hour. If you're looking for more information, here's a really good book on cholesterol. Everything we talked about today, but 10 times more, like way more detail that I could cover in an hour and a half. And then here's some supplements. And if everybody wants to try some fish oil, I will open it for you. But here's the CoQ10 that we talked about. Here's the berberine. And then 3 different varieties of fish oil. The Nordic Naturals Omega, they have kids ones too. And then Barlean's. There's a flax oil, so like there's a fish one or a flax oil. You could do either. So we can open like the flax omega. This is like a vegetarian or vegan source. That one definitely tastes good, so that's really good in a lot of stuff. You could dump your fish or your flax oil in a smoothie. You'll never really taste it. Get the lemon one though, like maybe not the fish one, but. So we have a few minutes. Let's take a couple questions if you have.
So I heard you say that you fast in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So
for my gut, I mostly do.
Okay, so I always have a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to workout every morning. So
Fasted.
what's that?
Fasted.
No.
Oh.
I'm just wondering, do I need to eat something if I'm going to go work out?
Mm-mm. No. And I would say go with how you feel too. For me personally,
I could go
because my blood pressure is low in the morning, but again, this is me, my body, not yours. I do yoga in the morning, Pilates, walk, jog a little bit, but I lift weights at the athletic club almost every day. I cannot do that in the morning if I haven't eaten. Personally, I can't. I just don't have enough energy. I don't, because I have to put a lot into lifting weights. taking a walk earlier in the day. I'm also not hungry in the morning, to be honest with you. If somebody gave me a yummy donut, like, and I wanted to eat it, yeah, I probably would like love that, but I really don't. I have an ongoing gut disease that sort of rears its ugly head every couple of years, and one of the best ways for me to prevent that is to rest and digest and fast. Not to the point that I feel like shaky blood sugary though, and that's why getting enough protein and fat and good solid meals matter, because I'm not eating any less fasting. Some people do that to lose weight, and that's fine. I do it for my gut and because I'm not hungry, and I spent years shoving breakfast down my throat at 8 o'clock and I didn't want to. And sometimes it would come back up because my body was like, no, we don't want all this. We don't want ground turkey. We don't want, we want maybe a couple strawberries and a cup of coffee, and that's all.
How late do you eat at night then?
Well, I don't get home from work till at least 8:30, so I eat later, but I don't go to bed till midnight. So like, again, my schedule might be different than you. So I sleep 12 to 7:30, 8 on weekends. So I tend to work, I'm working evenings because that's when people see me. So I'm working like 9 to 8, 10 to 8, Monday through Thursday, and then a half day on Friday. So I get home at 8:30. I generally have our meals already made though on Sunday, like prep all our meals ahead of time. So we're just microwaving something or quick putting chicken on the grill or whatever. So yeah, we're eating like 8:30 or 9. So I would say 9-ish is my last meal, and then I eat at like 11 or 12. So I'm going like 14, 15 hours. If you have not done fasting before and you just want to see what happens, I don't promote it or not promote it. It's based on your body. If you are metabolically flexible and in a healthy spot with your food and your insulin, you should be able to go a chunk of time and not eat. We just got back from Florida a couple of weeks ago, and like the flight time was funky, where you're like flying over a meal. And like I brought a meal on the plane, but then we were delayed, of course. And so then it was like, oh my God, like we're not going to eat till whatever. Was I hungry? Yeah, because I didn't want to stop on the way home because I just want to get home. And I knew if we stopped, it was going to be something crappy. And so I ate lunch on the plane at like 3, I guess it was, like 2, 3. And we were going to eat dinner we were supposed to be home at 6. So I was going to eat at like 1 and 6 or 12 and 6 or something like that. Well, that all got messed up. So I ate lunch at 3-ish, 3:30 on the plane. We didn't get home till 11. And so I don't normally eat at 11, but I had like a beef stew made. And so, yeah, I just literally ate that and went to bed. So I don't normally do that. But usually I'm done eating like 9-ish, but then I am up for another 3 hours past that. So, but yeah, so if I'm up at 7:30, I don't eat till 11:30. So it's like 4 hours for me. And I'm hungry by then. But then I'm not just eating a piece of toast. I'm eating 40 grams of protein, ground turkey, sweet potatoes, like the whole, like a meal. I'm eating a meal. And then I'm eating another meal early afternoon, maybe, 3 or something like that. Somewhere in there, I try to take a break. I sometimes bring a protein shake to meet with work. And then I'm eating my meal at night then. So I mostly am doing 3 meals a day, usually 3 meals and a protein shake because I try to get my protein in, but that's about it for me. Most of my clients that I work with, we usually do 3 meals and like a protein smoothie or shake. Some people, if you don't want to cook or they don't have much of an appetite or they really want to drop some weight, we'll do a lot of times like a loaded protein smoothie for breakfast, late morning, and then lunch and dinner, and then that's it. So you don't need to eat. That's the other thing with blood sugar. You don't need to eat 6 or 7 times a day like that. That's like a whole nother like myth in there too. Otherwise, your insulin's going like this, and then it just keeps wanting more and more and more and more. Rest and digest. Eat a meal with balanced carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Do that 3 times a day. You'll be good to go. It's honestly like back to basics and eating like you would eat if you grew up on a farm. I mean, it's eating like your beef, your potatoes from the garden, and your green beans, and then we didn't do dessert and like all that stuff after, Again, I'm not saying never have dessert, but just generally speaking, 80 or 90% of the time, I think trying to kind of elevate the choices that you make in your food are good. So, other questions?
What's the difference between flexi meal and oats?
This one's not from fish, and this one is. This one's from flaxseed. So omega-3s are prominent in fish and flax seeds. This is a flaxseed oil and this is a fish oil. So just depends on your preference. And we can open either one of these if you guys want to try it. I probably prefer the fish sourced one. I think it's a little better, a little stronger, but there'd be nothing wrong with doing the flax, or if you want to do some of each. When my kids were little, we did like a fish oil, but then one time I didn't get the lemon flavored one, and my son was like, "This is awful," and then he wouldn't touch it. So then I just switched to flax oil. So whatever. But like I said, otherwise you can take the capsules too. I have a problem swallowing oil of any kind, so I don't do the liquid. It's perfectly fine, but coconut oil, olive oil, Bodacious has some lovely like flavored olive oils, and I can't swallow a tablespoon of oil. It just makes me gag. I can't do it, so I just do a capsule. I can put it on a salad, which you could do with the flax or the omega, like the lemon, but I just can't. I don't know. I can't do it. So, yep.
So, I get the information from Mercy, and they give you the cholesterol, the triglycerides, the HDL, the LDL, and then they also give you something that seems to be cholesterol / HDL.
Yeah, that's just a ratio.
The AR1.
Yeah, and so usually that we want like under 5. That's probably the one you're talking about.
Okay.
Like 3 is a good ratio, but up to 5 is usually. But I would even say like, I don't know. I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that either, because that's cholesterol to HDL ratio, total cholesterol. And I'm already telling you, like, I don't know, the total cholesterol is like, in my opinion, not that big a deal. So you can look at that. I would just take it with a grain of salt. I would look at your triglycerides and your HDLs.
So it's under range, which is supposed to be 3.55. And I've been sitting at 2.5 to 3.1, and my doctor kept saying, "Oh, this is just wonderful." And I'm like, I don't think it is wonderful.
Yeah, interesting. So do you remember what your numbers are?
I got them, yeah.
Yeah, can you tell me?
What are we looking at?
So what's your total? And then HDL,
Most
LDL.
recent HDL was 47.
Okay.
The LDL was 131.
Okay.
That's really high.
And you're not on a statin?
Well, I quit taking statin about a year or so ago, and so I saw a heart doctor last month, and she's shrieking, but she's not happy.
Shrieking.
And yet,
But these are your non-statin numbers.
they are.
Okay, what's your total then?
Well, the total of those two would be.
Well, no, your total, just your total cholesterol.
Total cholesterol 193.
Okay, and then your triglycerides.
74.
So that's fabulous cholesterol right there.
Now, I had a heart attack 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think things are good, but, and when she did the stethoscope stuff.
Yep, and again, there's other pieces of that. So that's why it's important to look at some of the other parts of the list I gave you too, and not, because I would say, and again, I haven't done your health history, I don't know, but if I saw cholesterol like that, I would, move on. My only suggestion to you would be your HDLs could be higher. And so an omega-3, like supplement would probably be really good for you, like getting those up a little bit more, because that's your protective, like your good cholesterol. The statins that you were on a while back might have brought those down. And so that you could.
But the cholesterol thing went up real high. So
Okay.
It been around 120, dropped to 112, then it went up to 193.
Your LDLs, you mean?
The total cholesterol.
Oh, yeah, 193 is.
And the LDL at 131 jumped from the 60s.
Yeah, those are the ones I'm just not looking at as much. So, which I know is like an edgy opinion, but like a total cholesterol 193 is really great.
But when you were in the 60s, was that when you were on the statin?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that was suppressing it.
Yeah, it's
I'm
just
trying to
suppressing.
do a lot more with natural vitamins.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
some of the off-the-counter stuff is just.
And I can give you even like a doc if you want to do a one-time consult, if you want to, kind of sit down and look at some of this stuff just at the doctor's office. It won't cost you much. But again, I would, for you with that, if that's your numbers without statins, I'd get on some fish oil, maybe a couple of these other things. I would look at the other things we talked about in the list, the activity, the food, blood pressure, some of that other stuff. And I would definitely not jump on a statin with those numbers. So that's good.
I don't want to.
And you don't want to. And how old are you?
73.
Yeah, so that's the other issue with statins is they really degrade your muscle mass, and that is the last thing you want at 73. You don't want to be breaking bones and any of that stuff. Decreases your energy, testosterone levels. You need all that stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't do it either. And I would get this book because that's like a good read for you. That would explain, all of it too. So
She said, well, if you want to avoid the problems you're taking the statin pill, well, You have those shots, you go to shots, and then you won't have.
Oh, like a GLP? Oh, no, you really don't need that. Yeah. Or,
How much are they giving?
yeah, or you're gonna be given 3 other meds for the side effects of the statin that you're on. Because if you have nausea, well, now we need a pill for that. If you have headaches, well, now we need a pill for that. I can't sleep. Oh, let me give you a sleeping pill. So that's where it goes awry, right?
Right.
And so, and I'm not, I'm really not like anti-med, honestly. Like there's some meds, like I said, I think are great and like certain things. And I'm a therapist, so like mental health meds, like all that stuff, although I'm picky with those too. But I just don't think we need to be throwing a medication at everything. And I think a lot of times we pop a pill and then we are good because our numbers look good. We're still on a Burger King and sitting on the couch eating potato chips. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And I am not talking about perfection. I'm not talking about a perfect diet where you got to eat chicken and carrots all day. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you go out to eat once a week and you have your fish fry and you like whatever. Or maybe you kind of like go all in and like, you know, hit some of your goals for a year and then you get to, I always talk about like 80-20. But yeah, move your body, sleep, monitor your stress, look at your blood pressure. But food is medicine, people. Like it really is. And so eat your meats and your fish and your chicken and find some fun seasonings and some great olive oils. Like I said, Bodacious is like, they have lovely olive oils and vinegars for things. They're locally owned. Eat your vegetables, eat your fruits. If there's a whole bunch of vegetables that you don't like, that's okay. Do you know how many vegetables there are in the world? Have you tried them all? I mean, there's hundreds of them. I work with a lot of times younger people in their 20s who are like, well, I don't really like veggies or I don't, you know, I'm like, well, you know, let's try some. Let's try like one a week. But a lot of times we bypass like the sections of like even the root vegetables. Like we used to have celery root here. Woodman's has a lot of those funky parsnip. Like how many people buy parsnips, right? Like sometimes I put those in my meal plans. But and so some of those root vegetables, the starchy ones, are like really good and like they're comfort foods too, like a potato. You know, they're not just like a green bean or like whatever. And so just eat all those. But well, a lot of times we don't buy them because they look like brown rocks. You know, they just don't look like appetizing. You're like, what am I supposed to do with that? So I would say like try new foods in that, you know, regard. And the quinoa I talked about. Nuts and seeds, I'm a fan, but in moderation because those are high in omega-6s. And so we want more omega-3s than omega-6s. And so they should be done as like a condiment or something you sprinkle on your salad. And I don't mean trail mix with the M&Ms. I mean like the actual like raw nuts and seeds, you know, a handful on something or a handful a day or, you know, whatever, not 2 bags of almonds, chocolate covered. So, all right, I'll let you guys go for today. You gotta figure out how to turn this off.